Today, the Below Average Joe's MMA show present the weekend recap. And we are here to talk about UFC 286 that went down Saturday afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, but took place prime time in London, England. And we saw a trilogy that was so unlikely to ever happen in the first place come to its culmination, and the London fans were sent home happy with Leon Edwards coming out on top once again. We also got potentially one of the best fights of the year between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev, aka the least surprising statement of 2023 so far. All this and so many other great fights on this card to go over, and we're just ready to get right into it. All this and more, and it all starts right now. Welcome back, everybody. I'm one half of your hosting duo. My name's Noah Baker. The man on my right, coming to you from the great state of Ohio, is Dominic Salee. Dominic, how are you feeling? We are here coming off the UFC 36 the following afternoon. We're going to record this on Sunday. So, Dominic, how are you recovering less than 24 hours after the fights?
Recovering pretty well. It's going to be a good Sunday, I do believe, here on the podcast for us. UFC 285 it set some big expectations, and UFC 286 was pretty solid all in all. So I'll take it, man. And then again in 2 weeks we have another pay-per-view, so they just keep on coming. But it's going to be great. It was fun. The London crowd, man, it's just special over there. I'm already anticipating the UFC going back before the year's end, much like they did last year. So it was awesome. Those European fans, those UK fans are just savages. They love the fight game over there. And for 15 straight fights, it was just awesome. And as it always is. So I'm excited to recap it, to discuss it. Noah, how was your weekend? I know that your cousin Caleb was there. He's been featured on the channel before in our vlog from Columbus. So how was it watching fights with him?
It was good. I was glad to have him here to watch the fights. Um, it was nice just to have someone else by my side. And him were pretty much coming in each other's holes the whole time on the betting side of things. And for the most part, I'd say it went pretty well. I'm now known as the Lock King. I will not be known by any other name on this channel. So make sure if you ever see me, you come correct.
Let him know.
But regardless, let's talk about the first live bet that I put into place Saturday, Dominic. Your main event saw Leon Edwards in what was an unlikely trilogy to ever take place. Leon shocked the world in his second fight with Usman in Salt Lake City, Utah, with the head kick heard around the world in the fifth round, despite being down on the cards. He comes back here, has made a star of himself, is put in front of his home crowd and said, slay the beast a second time. You did it once, can you do it twice? And he did it, Dominic. He gets the win via majority decision, 248-46 scorecards and 147-47 draw. So that's where we'll start the questions for today, Dominic. Just going to ask you, what did you think of both men's performances in here? Did anything about Leon or Usman surprise you? Did anything about their performances disappoint? Not exactly the fight itself, but just the performances. Any sort of disappointment. And I'll ask you what was your scorecard for the fight?
Scorecard for me was 3-2 Leon. And in terms of
So then it would have been a draw then on your scorecard?
yeah, that's true. I guess it would have been. But yeah, I thought both performances from both guys were pretty much what you would expect from them. I honestly thought Kamaru would grapple a little bit more than what he did. He chose to strike an awful lot with Leon. He held his own, but Leon definitely got the best of the exchanges, the better, bigger shots throughout the 25 minutes. When Kamaru chose to wrestle, he had decent success, but nowhere near as good as he did in that first fight. I think he had 11 takedowns in the first fight. Leon showed that he's made improvements over these last 6.5 months. Even when he was, taken down, he was able to get back up outside of the fence grab, which was what took that point away in the third round. He did really well defensively up against the cage. He looked strong, was able to reverse positioning. His striking was on point. He was mixing up the leg kick, body kicks, and head kicks to keep Kamaru guessing, because obviously, Kamaru was coming in ready to defend that left high kick. I think he maybe got it through twice in those 5 rounds, one really clean. But all in all, man, I think it was a really good fight. There's something about these trilogy fights. In that third fight, it always seems to go the distance and be a really good, really competitive fight lately. And immediately in my head is Stipe versus DC3, a very good 25-minute fight. So this was very good ending to their chapter, to their rivalry. It's good that Leon can now separate himself, not have his name attached to Usman anymore, and go forward with this title reign and what's to come next. And for Usman, it did feel like the end of an era for him, a guy that had won the title from a pretty dominant champion in Tyron Woodley, then defended it himself 5 times with very, very good performances. He made himself probably the second best welterweight of all time behind GSP. So he has a huge legacy left behind. And he said afterwards, he's not done yet too. So that's something exciting that we can talk about briefly. But yeah, performance-wise, I liked what I saw, and it led to a very good fight. What do you think of the performances, and did you have it 3-2 Leon as well?
I had it 4-1, so I had
4
it
to 1.
48-46. And that worked out for me because at the end of the second round is when I placed my live bet on Leon money line. It was plus 135, and I was shocked because in my head I said I thought both those rounds were easy Leon rounds. So I was like, well, I'm definitely jumping on this because he's up 2-0. Little did I know, because I have someone with me now for these fights, so I'm more talking to him, my cousin. Normally, I'd be getting on Twitter and seeing what other people are scoring the fight in between rounds. Well, if I had, there was probably a lot of people saying 1-1, but I felt like it was pretty clear 2-0. I don't know, maybe I missed something. So then I put that money down, and then Dominic in the third round is when the point gets deducted, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh boy, I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
this is maybe gonna blow up in my face. Maybe I took it a step too far with the live bets. Alexa, Marvin, Vettori. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that later, but I hit those. I'm like feeling a little maybe cocky, a little confident, and I test my luck, and it's not gonna work out.
Yeah.
But Leon dug deep. He was able to pull out the championship rounds, which I think really shows the growth in his game. Because if you look at the last fight, yes, the head kick that knocked out Usman was landed in round 5. But Leon and Dominic made a good point, probably due to the elevation that they were fighting at, really slowed as the fight went into those championship rounds. And there is something to a champion who looks better in rounds 4 and 5. Like, it almost makes it feel like, I don't know, there's something poetic about that. Like, it's someone who can get better in the championship rounds because they are a true champion. Leon Edwards did that in this fight. I felt like he really got his groove in the championship rounds. They were close rounds for sure, but it just felt like if Usman was content with staying on the feet and trying to land power shots, Leon just had the much more diverse striking, had more weapons, and utilized those. And yes, had great takedown defense throughout the fight. Usman, I don't even know if Usman had, like, yes, he did have a couple takedowns, Dom, but as far as actual damage incurred in those situations, there was no submission attempts, obviously. And I didn't feel like there was much damage at all given
Yep.
to Edwards when that fight hit the ground. So, under the scoring criteria, that pretty much negates any of that.
Yep.
And that was a great game plan by Edwards and his team. And Edwards did it again. And I was not super confident that he'd be able to do it a second time. I told you I started the sorta like I became less confident in Usman in the lead up, but I still was leaning his direction. And I mean, it's very telling when it's the end of the fight, Dom, and the controversy is if I don't even know if controversy is the right word, but the debate is if this fight should have been scored for Leon or a draw. I mean, it
Right.
seemed like there was pretty much no argument you could make for
Yep.
Usman to win the fight outright, and I think
Very good
that's
point.
very telling that at the end of the day, the only person who came close to costing Leon the fight was Leon himself. He did commit about 4 fouls in this fight, and the fence grab being the most egregious of the bunch, and is what Herb Dean came in and point deduction for, which I actually that was time to take a point. I thought in that moment he made the right choice. I felt like that was the right decision to make because it was pretty bad. But at the end of the day, Leon still had to go out there and win the rest of that fight, and that's exactly what he did. I want to ask you about Usman real quick. You kind of said you felt like it's the end of an era for him. Like it's, and when you say that, when I hear that, that comes off like you kind of think his days as a champion are pretty much done. And I know we've talked about how little amount of fights he probably has left. Well, after the fight, he did say he's not done. He said he's going to come back, and his whole plan is to eventually meet up with Leon a fourth time. So, I guess Dominic, when you say that, do you feel like there was anything you saw from Usman in this fight that showed that he is not the same fighter he was even in August or before?
Ah, mm, I mean, all in all, I guess he still looked like, the traditional Kamaru Usman. I thought he looked a little more weathered in the fourth and fifth round, which he hadn't
Yeah.
really seen as much, especially in the fifth. Leon had a really, really good fifth round. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I thought he looked good. He didn't really pose many threats on the feet, but then again, he never really has that often outside of a couple big knockouts. He's shown to improve his power and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, it wasn't really the skill set that I felt was diminished to lead me to say end of an era. It was just, it felt like, that you tried to get your belt back, you didn't. Already knowing you don't have many fights left, can you really get back there with some of these names that are now at the top of welterweight? I just think it seems really hard. I know he can beat a lot of these 170 pounders. I mean, literally, we've seen him run through the division. So I'm not saying he can't necessarily get back to a title shot. I just think with the way the division's moving, with his aspirations and kind of what could be next for him, maybe even tries to get a big fight with someone. I don't know, at 185. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but you never know. Yeah, that's kind of what led me to believe or led me to say the end of the era kind of comment. But in terms of what I saw in the cage, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's still an elite level welterweight.
I mean, that's why I kind of can't quite say that like that's it for him because I mean, we're going to talk about Colby Covington in a minute, who won one fight between losing his title fight and is now scheduled, it looks like, to get another title fight. I mean, I think it's pretty clear Usman just needs to win one fight and then he's right back in the title picture, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Well,
you could say that.
Hamzat's pretty much moved up. Dana said he's fighting at 185 next. So, Masvidal seems to be falling out of that picture. If he beats Burns, sure, he's kind of back in. But then Gilbert Burns is there. You got Bilal Muhammad. You know, Shavkat, I guess, obviously is they're looking at doing Shavkat and Bilal. So Shavkat's like ready to, come in
Mhm.
and make some noise. You know, that's really the guys, and I think Usman right now you'd have to favor Usman over almost every one of those guys in terms of who you think that could actually beat him, and because of that, I think there's a great chance we could see this fight even run back a fourth time.
Yeah, I think now that Colby is pretty much guaranteed this title shot and they're booking Bilal and Shavkat, that does make the road back, I think, it's more simple for Kamaru and definitely can solidify that, yeah, you probably just need one win to get in there. Because one, Colby could become the champ, and then you have a trilogy matchup with him and Kamaru.
Yeah.
And then, obviously Bilal and Shavkat they're going to eliminate each other rather than I felt like it should have been Bilal getting a title, Colby versus Shavkat. So if that would have
Hmm.
been the case, I feel like Kamaru's a little bit further. But now with what the picture looks like, you probably are right. One win, and he can kind of see what the territory is going to look like and maybe get a fourth shot with Leon or a trilogy with Colby. I
Yeah,
just
and I
wonder
don't
who he can
expect
fight in the
him.
meantime, I guess. That's what
Yeah,
I
I
guess I'm
mean,
wondering.
I don't think he's coming back right away. Like, I think he's
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
taking, we may see him like at the end of the year,
yeah,
but it wouldn't surprise me if it's even into 2024, once he comes back. And by that point, Dominic, the division's going to be moved around and matchups are going to
oh
be
yeah,
all over the place. So I'm sure there'll be an open matchup for him. Um, at this time, I don't really have an inkling one way or another. But let's kind of talk about that future matchup. For Dana, he tends to say, "I don't make fights the night of the fight." Well, he made
yeah,
like two of them on this night, or at least he announced two of them that they're talking about tonight. And one of them was we did have a backup fighter here, and it was kind of kept hush hush, which is kind of un. I mean, that's not something the UFC usually does. It feels like lately they've been kind of doing that. They did it with 285. I think wasn't it Pavlovich that was the backup fighter, and that kind of got leaked out. It wasn't something that was
yeah,
said ahead of time, and then they kind of did the same thing here. Colby Covington ended up weighing in as the backup fighter, which kind of got a lot of people talking. They were
yes,
asking Dana before the fight if that meant he was next for the title, and he would not commit to that. He's like, no, we appreciate anybody who steps up to weigh in as a backup, but we're whatever he says, he's doing his normal thing where not committing to giving him the next shot. Well, then after the fight, that completely changed. He said that
yeah,
Colby is absolutely next for the title, that
yeah,
there is a 0% chance that the winner of Burns Masvidal would be next, which that's not even the winner of that fight's really not the one who would be getting
no,
overlooked here. It's clearly Bilal Muhammad,
yeah,
who is on what is it, 8-fight winning streak, 6-fight winning streak, something like
yeah,
that.
something
And
like
in
that.
this division, that the top of the heap has been very stagnant. In all honesty, like there's a lot of,
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's a very talented division, and I think there's tons of guys at that top that could be champions. We talked about, I listed off a few of them. I mean, Shafkat seems like an absolute tank.
Yeah,
Bilal keeps surprising me each time out. Colby Covington feels a lot like one of those guys who, if Kamaru Usman wasn't around in the UFC, he would have been one of those guys that was chasing GSP's legacy for title defenses and whatnot. Then you have Leon Edwards, who is really coming into his own with the confidence. He's got a nation behind him and is proving a lot of people wrong with his title reign now. I think there's a ton of guys here, and Gilbert Burns, even probably one of the most underrated guys in the division. Don't forget, he knocked down Kamaru Usman in their fight. Even took that first round before losing, but ever since then, he's looked great.
hmm,
He took an absolute war to Hamzat Chimaev before anybody thought that was possible. So what I'm trying to say is it's a very talented division with a lot of guys who feel like they can be champions, but building these long winning streaks is not something that's very common here. And Bilal
hmm.
Muhammad has done that. And it's a shame because Leon versus Bilal should be the next title fight. But it's very
100%.
clear why it's not, because just what fight, when I mentioned the names, Dom, which fight got you a little more excited? Was it Leon versus Bilal or Leon versus Colby? I mean, I think it's pretty clear.
Not even really the fight itself, but it's more so the lead up of the fight and the name value. We know that goes to Colby, and
I
that's
mean,
what
wouldn't you say? You don't think it's the fight itself too? Because I mean, Bilal is coming off a great performance against Sean Brady, and that was like a knockout, and he looked damn good. But he is a guy that has a reputation for being a less than exciting fighter. Typically a guy that will, if you were to think of how he would try to win that matchup with Leon, he'd be looking to take him down and, maybe land a little bit of ground and pound, but his whole thing would be top control and just keeping position on the ground. It's not the most exciting style fight.
Yeah, I guess Colby's kind of the same, but just a level up. But on the feet, especially with his pressure and pacing and kind of his volume and output to get to the takedown. So yeah, I guess that does lead to a more exciting fight at the end of the day. So he kind of does check all the boxes, except for
Yeah.
just being deserving of it.
Well, I guess that would be a question, Dom. Do you feel like Colby take out Bilal from the equation? Is Colby, the guy who has come very close twice? The first fight with Usman was December 2019,
Hmm.
fight of the year contender. Colby was arguably either tied or winning that fight going into that fifth round, but Usman, being the guy who had the better striking ultimately and had just a little more left, was able to put Colby away in that fifth round. Colby comes back in 2020 and fights Tyron Woodley, gets a TKO due to a rib injury in the fifth round of that fight, but dominated pretty much the whole way.
Hmm.
Then he gets the rematch in 2021 with Kamaru. Great fight, goes the distance. Kamaru's able to edge him out on the scorecards. Even rocked Colby at one point again. Colby never quite able to do that to Kamaru, but did stay in that fight. It was very competitive. So then Colby's fight after that, 2022, he fights Jorge Masvidal and, pretty decisively wins that fight
Hmm.
from start to finish. So Dominic, since 2019, Colby has only fought once a year,
Yeah.
but he's 2-2 in that time, two title fights. Then
Hmm.
he has gone on to win a fight in between to earn him another shot. So it looks like that pattern is going to
The trend.
repeat here,
Yeah.
as he will now be looking to fight Leon. Do you feel like, even regardless of Bilal's, seemingly more deserving resume, do you feel like Colby at all should be in this title picture, or should he be forced to go fight someone else and get a win? And I'm trying to say this without Bilal in the picture. So it's like, let's say the only competition for that spot was like the winner of Burns Masvidal or something like that. Like, do you feel like for Colby, the fact that he's only coming off that one win, even though it was in a main event against Jorge, that the sporadic activity over the last few years, like, does he need to have a more sustained winning streak before he's being given another shot?
I think so because again, this is Bilal aside. I think if Gilbert were to beat Jorge, he would, for me, be ahead of Colby in the
Mm.
number one contender race. And it's not because he's coming off the same win as Jorge, but no, before that he dominated Neil Magny. Before that he was in a fight of the year with Hamzat Chimaev that you could argue he won, and before that he absolutely throttled Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Gilbert Burns seemingly has gotten better, honestly, since his title fight with Kamaru Usman. So yeah, I mean, I have nothing against Colby. The way that he, like, the pressure and the pacing and the output that he has in his fights is insane. Like, not many people can match it. The trash talk, the personality, he's always going to have eyeballs on him coming into the fight week, and he mostly delivers in the fights as well, especially these last couple years in the big high profile matchups, which does say a lot. But all the inactivity, I mean, it's been a year now since that win, but we're talking at least 4 or 5 more months before he were to fight Leon again. That's a year and a half, over a year and a half since his last fight, and it's going to be for a title. I don't know, man. And a win against Jorge Masvidal in 2022 isn't quite the same as a win over Jorge would have been, like it was for Kamaru in 2019, or even the second time they fought. It doesn't hold as much weight as it once did, but the name value, the personality, that's what sells fights. That's what's going to get you to the top faster in this sport. So I understand why the UFC wants to do it. And shout out to him for being the backup, by the way. That says a lot, to fly across the world, weigh in, make the weight. You're there, just like Michael Chandler did. And he was awarded for doing that as well, with big opportunities in a title fight as well after winning. So I understand. I may not agree, but that's okay. And honestly, I want to hear what you say as well.
Um, I don't know. It's hard. Like, when I heard that Colby was getting the next fight, I can't lie, I wasn't like excited for it. Um, I guess that's at the end of the day. Like, I can say exactly what you're saying, and I do agree with you. Like, because I try to be that guy when we talk about the sport. I try to be about who's the most deserving of that opportunity.
Hmm.
Look at it more from a sport than an entertainment
Hmm.
aspect. I try to do that. Like, who's the guy that should be next based off of the resume, based
Right.
off of who should be the number one contender. And, it's no doubt Bilal. And I've come around on Bilal. I'm no longer, I'm a reformed Bilal lover now. I'm a
Yes.
Bilal fan club member now. So this isn't the old me that would be like, kind of trolling Bilal for not getting this opportunity. But from almost any measure you can give, Colby versus Leon is a better fight. It's
Mm-hmm.
stylistically a more exciting fight. The lead up is more exciting. Like you kind of compared Bilal and Colby in their styles, and I only think you can compare them in terms of their natural wrestlers, but I don't think their styles are at all similar.
Mm-hmm.
Because Colby tends to use his wrestling to he takes people down, allows them to work their way back up, and then takes them down again. Meanwhile,
Mm-hmm.
while he's got you clinched up and it's got you along the fence, he's peppering you with shots the entire time. And that zaps you of your energy. You look at his fight with Robbie Lawler, that's exactly what he
Mm-hmm.
did. While Bilal, in most of his fights, now recently, has not really been doing that as much. The Luque fight, he did not really do that. He used a lot of pressure in that fight and
Yeah.
really kept cutting off Luque against the fence. Then against Sean Brady, he did it on the feet as well. But
Mm-hmm.
before that, he was very much a take you down, hold position, just not a very exciting style of fight. There's not a whole lot happening, right? To the casual eye, to the fan perspective. And at the end of the day, I want to see who's the best fighter in the world. I do. So I would, if you asked, like, if I was to make the decision, I would put Bilal in that spot. But
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for me to hold up too much on it. We can't deny that I got excited about the idea of being in this title fight. Even though, again, it's like, it is weird, man. That's 3 title fights and it'll be 6 fights, I guess.
Yeah.
Or no, 3
5
title
fights.
fights in his last 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's yet to win one. And
Yeah.
yes, don't get me wrong, he's been very competitive, but it's kind of weird to me. I mean, it's better than I was honestly worried that the alternative might be if Jorge Masvidal beats Burns,
Yeah.
that they would give
Yeah.
him the shot because of that built-in story with him
Right.
and Leon dating back to when Masvidal really had the start of his come up
Yeah.
in terms of his star power. So I was actually more concerned about that because honestly, Masvidal is very similar to Colby, except he's
Yeah.
lost more often
Yeah.
in that time frame. So I guess that's one positive spin on it. But yeah, it feels like if Burns beats Masvidal, you got Bilal sitting out here. It kind of feels like either one of those two guys are kind of getting screwed over in the process. But I mean, it's a game. They're trying to sell the fight, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
Colby's going to do that. It's just I want to see Colby fight more, man. It's
I
like
know. I know.
this once a year deal. Like I know he had, especially this last time, like the issue afterwards when Masvidal like sucker punched him or allegedly, uh,
Mm-hmm.
quotations allegedly, sucker punched in Miami or whatever, and there was some rumors behind the scenes because Colby has been like completely out of the public eye, if you've noticed, like
He
up
really
until this
has.
weekend,
Yeah.
and has not done like any media. What was all the rumors about the way his eye was looking after that sucker punch? There was rumors of like he had or said like he had gotten his tooth punched out or something, and I mean there was some really weird rumors
Yeah.
out there, brain damage and all this stuff. So it sounds like some of them were not obviously true, but because of that, I'm going to give him a pass because it sounds like it was a very tumultuous period, in his life. But
Mm-hmm.
overall, it does feel like, this guy just pops up once a year to fight for the title. Like that's what it sort of
Yeah.
has felt like over the last few years. And, I'd like to see him kind of, win a couple fights and show how good he is. Cause I have no doubt if he fought a couple times, like if he got one more fight, let's say they did him and Bilal, that Bilal said that Colby turned him down for this very
I
card
heard that. Yeah.
Saturday. Um, in order to weigh in as the backup, which a little weird because a lot of times there have been guys in the past who have been on the
Right.
same card
Yeah.
and have also weighed in and they've also been like the backup in place
Just
for
in
a fight
case.
above them.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know how true it is, but if it is like, if Colby were to beat Bilal, then he would clearly have a claim to fight for the title. Like it would clearly be there. That's why you just want to see from him. You just want to see him go and earn it a little more. Like, yes, I get
Yeah.
it. He's a name. He's so talented. He's all these things. He's got, he makes people hate him and want to watch him to lose and blah blah blah. But we're so little now seeing his excellence that it's sort of making us kind of forget how good he actually is. And
Hmm.
instead, all we can focus on is, well, he sells fight and, he talks a lot of shit and the lead up will be fun. But I mean, at the end of the day, Colby is a much better fighter than he is a shit talker. He's actually kind of bad at shit talking, but he's pretty good at fighting.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to ask you this, and this is a way too early preview, but we're allowed to do that
Mm.
sometimes. Right now, being that you've now seen Leon beat Kamaru twice, second time over the course of 5 rounds, while stuffing grappling and wrestling, getting the best on the feet. If you had to pick today, where would you lean in a Leon versus Colby matchup? That's an
Yeah, I've
unfair
been thinking
question, I
about
know,
this.
but
Well, I know. I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it because once I watched Dana's post-fight presser, I kind of had to.
yeah. I feel like I
I
have a
feel
hard time
like
going against Leon.
I'll be honest. See. I have a hard time going against Colby because I've always said if Kamaru like wasn't in that
Right?
division, that Colby would be like a champion.
Yep.
But based off of the way Leon looked Saturday, and you know, it kind of makes me think that he might be able to hold up over the course of 5 rounds because Kamaru is a better striker than Colby. So if
Yeah.
Colby's not able to take Leon down, I think it could be a pretty long 5 rounds for him.
Hmm.
Um, I'll say Leon right now, but I leave myself open to change that when the time
Right.
comes.
Right. Of course. Of course.
Let's talk about that co-main event, Dominic. What a fight this was. Justin Gaethje ultimately gets the win over
Hmm.
Rafael Fiziev. Was this also a majority decision?
It was. Yes, we had back to backs.
God damn. A lot of weird ass scoring on this card, which we can maybe talk about a little bit, but I don't feel like it. If I remember right, I don't think the scoring of this card, and there was some bad scorecards, don't get me wrong, but I don't think anybody got screwed because of a bad scorecard. Am I wrong about that? I feel like for the most
No,
part,
no one got the wrong side. Yeah,
so I
that's
feel like for
correct.
the most part, the scorecards were egregious to a certain extent, but thankfully nobody who should have won got screwed. Although
Right.
there was some controversy with the Lerone Murphy fight. A lot of people thought Daniel Santos won, but I think that fight was so close. I don't think that's really a robbery either way. Regardless, this fight actually, there have been a lot of people, though, Dom, that have come out and said that Fiziev, they believe, was the guy that should have got his hand raised here. But ultimately, Justin Gaethje is the one that does it. Um, he does so via majority decision. This fight was violent, but that's exactly what was advertised. And this was just such a fun back and forth fight that saw Fiziev come out very strong. His speed, along with the power, was unreal to watch. And he looked so much faster than Justin Gaethje in there. And you could tell Gaethje just seemed to have a tough time getting a
Mhm.
read on that. However, as the fight wore on, Gaethje was able to land some very damaging shots. And what was pretty clear by the end of that fight was that Gaethje was the fresher man. Both guys ate a lot of shots, but there was no doubt who the guy that was able to go longer was. As Fiziev was busted up bad, Gaethje looking pretty clean for the most
Mhm.
part for a guy who just went to war. And he's ultimately gets his hand raised due to his work he did in rounds 2 and 3. So, Dominic, I'm assuming by your reaction, you scored the fight for Justin Gaethje. What did you kind of think here of this fight? Where do you think it sort of ranks right now for fight of the year? Do you think it's up there? Do you think it's a little overrated in that aspect? 3 rounder, it's kind of hard sometimes to, even though we've done it in the past with Gaethje Chandler. But what are you kind of thinking about this fight?
Oh, sorry. Just choked on some spit. Went down the wrong hole. This fight was awesome. That's just copy and paste from what everybody's saying, though. But I want to take a second to talk about the performance from Justin Gaethje, because I think this third round may have been the best version of Justin Gaethje we've ever seen, or damn near one of, because to come into the third round in a fight that was this tough, I did have it 1-1 going into the third, but to do what he did against an elite level striker in Rafael Fiziev was impressive, man. Not only was he able to pull away and win that third round convincingly enough to where one judge scored it a 10-8. That's kind of crazy. But
Come on,
in that
come
third
on! Don't
round,
use that.
I know.
Don't use that as proof to help you. Come on, Dom.
Well, I'm just saying, if you take away the first minute from Fiziev, you probably could have scored that. But with the first minute he had, you can't do that. That's terrible. But the way that he was able to flip that switch in the third round, come back and win 4 straight minutes and brutalize Rafael for like 3 of those 4 minutes with his lead jab was nasty. Once he found it, he kept peppering and peppering and peppering. And you guys have seen the picture. If you haven't by now, look it up, of Rafael, what he looked like after the fight. It was nasty. Parental advisory there for that one. This was an awesome, awesome performance from Justin Gaethje in a fight that I think stylistically is like one of the hardest that he can have with the current state of the lightweight division. And at 34 years old, the dude has now had 11 UFC fights, a bonus in all 11 fights. He very well could be the most exciting fighter in UFC history. He said that going into this fight. And then after this fight, it's hard not to agree with him, honestly, from where I'm sitting. So he wants one more. And if he wins that one, he wants a title fight. And Noah, there's never been a better time than now to run back him and Dustin Poirier for the second time. It's been overdue, I feel like. And right now, it is a match made in heaven for a 5-round main event. It is the perfect time because Justin welcomed a newcomer and defeated them. I know Dustin hasn't done that, but he at least went and beat Michael Chandler. Let's run that thing back a second time, please.
Yeah, completely agree. That's the fight to make. Thank you very much. One thing I do kind of hope about this fight, and I almost didn't want to mention it because I feel like it's going to come off like I'm trying to take away something from Gaethje's performance, but I'm really not. I just hope when I noticed Fiziev's right eye started to get really swollen and bad directly after the eye poke, that he kind of stopped the action. So I just really hope that didn't slow down Fiziev down the stretch due to the fact he couldn't really see out of that right eye anymore. Just throwing that out there. But I mean, Justin Gaethje looked terrific here. I would still argue I think the Tony Ferguson fight is the best version of Justin Gaethje we've seen, but there's no doubt that this was up there, and he was a guy that was a big underdog for this fight. So for him to come out here and kind of weather that initial storm and just be the guy, to be the fresher guy late into that fight, really shows a lot of growth in Gaethje's game that maybe a lot of people wouldn't have thought of going in, that he was capable of at this age, and due to his style that seems so just aggressive and I think a lot of people look at his fight style and just think that there's not a whole lot of IQ going on there, that he's really just going for broke, going for a finish, looking to put on a show. But this is a very smart fighter, people. And, just because he wants to put on a show and look for the knockout and doesn't use his wrestling despite his background, although he did get a takedown here, first takedown of his professional MMA career, Dom. So
with the pedigree that he has too, that's insane.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, though, I do think he's a very smart fighter. Just his style is violence, and he typically comes out better than the guy he's going up against. You saw it here. I mean, that first round, he was getting ate alive. Like the body work by Fiziev. He was mixing it up very well. He had trouble with the hand speed. But then by the end of that fight, he just didn't even look like it had even phased him at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's very impressive. The Poirier fight clearly next. Fiziev should hold his head high here. I mean, it's a tough loss for sure because just because like we kind of built it up in the lead up that a win here would put him firmly in contendership status. So now he's not quite in that discussion yet, but I still think he's due for another pretty decent fight, another big fight. Honestly, Dominic, it wouldn't surprise me if they try to do him versus Arman here soon.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Well, that's the thing, that sounds great, but is that something we really want to do now, or do we want to wait till they're both firmly in the contender picture to really make that fight a big deal, or even potentially have one of them as a champion, and then you do that as a title fight? So that's a question the UFC will have to ask themselves, because this is a division more than others where it feels like the right thing to do is to kind of match up these guys that are building a name and are on their way up versus guys who have been stagnant, holding their ground in the top of the division. So yes, of course, this was an example of that. Gaethje wins. But do you want to match up two of your most promising prospects now where, yes, they're big deals, but they could be even bigger? That's a question I'll let the UFC answer, but I'm not going to lie. I'd love it. I'd love to see that fight.
I feel like old Dom would have said no, please don't. But since we've already seen Matos and Arman do it, I'm like, fuck it. We might as well just run Rafael and Arman. You know what? If we don't want to match him up now, maybe he could get the winner of Dariush and Oliveira. Or I'm not the winner, sorry, the loser of that fight. Maybe that would make sense. He could fight another kind of veteran. I think he proved that he can hang with these fellas, so he should stay firmly at number 6 in this division too come Tuesday.
Yeah, for sure. Dominic, with that, we'll move on to the rest of UFC 286. And before I ask you about main card and then prelims, we're going to talk about a little announcement that got made during the card for International Fight Week, the UFC Hall of Fame class of 2023. We're already looking at inducting Jose Aldo along with Jens Pulver. Well, Dominic, they have finally done it. I think it was the perfect time to do this. 3 years after he last performed inside the UFC octagon, Anderson Silva will be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Dominic's favorite fighter of all time. In a lot of ways, the man that's sort of responsible for this entire channel and what we've sort of done here, because Dominic has said on multiple occasions that if not for Anderson Silva, he's not so sure he would have become as big of a fan as he is today. And if Dominic wasn't the fan he was, 7 years ago, then I may not be the fan that I am today.
You see the pattern.
So Anderson Silva is solely responsible for this channel in a lot of ways. But Dominic, this is obviously an announcement more catered to, your fandom. So I just want to let you give a chance to kind of talk about what the emotions were like as this video package played on your television Saturday.
Yeah, man. At first, they kind of started rolling. I'm like, all right, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And then he said Spider. And I'm like, oh, and I immediately texted in the group, here come the tears. I feel them now. And then, the eyes got a little watery. I mean, look, let's see here. This is July 19th, 2008. Okay. Anderson Silva going up to 205 to fight James Irvin. So July 8th, 2008. Was that 2008? That's 15 years ago. I would have been 10. I would have just turned 10. 10-year-old Dom is smiling so big right now, Noah. Just like 24-year-old Dom. It was emotional. It's so awesome to see that video package, something that's long overdue. They never really gave him the rightful kind of swan song after that last fight with Uriah Hall, which really hurt. That whole fight week just hurt me very badly. And then the COVID thing happened after that. It was a rough week there for the Joes that week. But man, I can't help but just smile and be so happy for this legend. The prime Anderson Silva run is something that I think is going to be hard to match for many, many, many years to come in this sport. Just what he was doing, the way he was looking, the flashiness. He really, in a way, was like not the first superstar, right? We obviously had the Chuck Liddells, the Titos and stuff before him. But in terms of a global status, he was like that first big worldwide, like getting recognition from Nike and having sponsorships with them and just on a global scale. Anderson really kind of raised the bar for fighters. I think he doesn't get enough respect in that aspect of his career because of just the accolades that he did inside of the cage, but he just did so much more outside. And it's just a legendary thing. I'm so happy for him. And I can really go on and on, but I would just be repeating myself. It's just an incredible, incredible honor. And I'm so happy to see it.
Yeah, he was never the biggest pay-per-view draw. I think there did become a point in his career, especially when Chael Sonnen got inserted into the picture that picked up for him. But before that, Dominic, he was this guy that was, I mean, so talented, probably the most talented guy the UFC had ever seen at that point.
Mhm.
And yet it was like people just didn't really know who he was. And yes, it was like kind of after that jail fight where, you did get that Nike sponsorship, and it did feel like to a certain extent he hit, a certain level. I mean, this isn't like Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor territory, but um, he, of course, became a much bigger name, at that point than he had been previously. But Dominic, if you take all that out of the picture, because really once his name took on an elevated status, that's sort of where things began to go downhill for him in his
Mm.
UFC career. But take out that second that portion of his career and just look at when you look at any UFC fighter and you compare them for who they were, how talented they were at their peaks, at
Oh,
their absolute best. Um, there's not many outside of John Jones. That might be it that I would
yeah,
put over Anderson Silva, even GSP,
yeah,
who I would put above Anderson in terms of all time rankings. You know, I think Anderson at his best just made people look stupid in
yeah,
the octagon.
yeah.
So it's obviously deserving. I saw some people saying it was a few years too, like this should have happened a few years earlier. But Dominic, we come from a fandom. We
Hmm.
started our fandom in other sports where Hall of Fames, like you typically do have like a 5 year
Yeah, right.
window before you get inducted, and I kind of like that.
No,
I
I
don't
do
like
too.
people getting inducted while they're still fighting. Like it just
Yeah,
doesn't
definitely not
feel
while you're
right.
still fighting. Yeah,
Like, don't get me wrong, there's people who will be in right now that are still fighting. Like, I think a lot of us would assume at some point Kamaru Usman would be there,
hmm,
or, well, I'm going to blank on some. Well, John Jones, of course,
yeah, right,
like
right. And he's already in.
Stipe,
There's a
right?
version
Yeah,
though.
well, Stipe.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of guys, Henry Cejudo, there's a lot of
Hmm.
guys who at some point will be in. But I like giving it a couple years to marinate, let them be firmly retired
Yeah.
because you never know. And really, with Anderson, you still don't know. I mean,
Yeah. He's
this man's
boxing.
getting inducted after losing to Jake Paul in boxing. So
Yeah.
sorry to hurt you with that one, Dominic. But
Fake smile still
no,
initiated
but I
as
mean,
far.
he could always come back to MMA for all we know. So, I mean, it is what it is. But no, there's obviously nobody more deserving than him to be in that spot, and there might be a chance the Joes are in negotiations to potentially be in attendance. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's
Stay
still a
tuned.
lot of logistics to work out, but
Yeah. Yeah.
and a lot of price tags to hash
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We have the text has been
It's been tossed out there.
initiated.
Yeah.
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 But as for the rest of UFC 286, Dominic, we'll start with the main card. Just three more fights on here. Was there anything that sort of stood out to you under that main and co-main?
Um. Honestly, I mean, I enjoyed the other three fights. In terms of like I'll give a little bit here to Roma Dolidze because I was just heavily
Mm.
on the Vettori side going in, and while he did win, and I felt that the right man won, Dolidze hung in a lot better than I thought, especially over the course of 3 rounds.
Well, let me
'Cause-
ask you a question though, because
Mhm,
you had said if Dolidze won this fight,
mhm.
he'd make a believer out of you. A believer in this idea that not only that he could be a contender, but that he could compete for a title and potentially even, win a title, which competing for a title and winning a title is still a pretty big leap. But, let's just walk with me for a second.
Mhm.
So, even in this losing effort, but it was a much closer fight than maybe you had anticipated, did he make that believer out of you to that extent?
Not fully, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
stick firm to that statement from Friday's show, but I'll tell you, he did look like a top six, top five guy to do what he did against Vittori. Have a very, very close, competitive back and forth fight. I think says a lot because again, what we say on Friday, me specifically, if it's not for Adesanya and Whitaker, I don't think anybody's beaten Vettori, and he's probably a champion right now. So yeah, I liked what I saw from both guys. Vettori needed a win to kind of get back into the win column, solidify himself still amongst the top of the contender guys. And Dolidze hung tough, man, and he looked much better than a number 9 ranked fighter in the division. So I'm not going to give up completely on what Dolidze can do, but still the title aspirations, I think I'm going to stick firm on until he proves me otherwise. Maybe he runs it back down the road and beats Vettori for all I know, but he's a fun fighter. He's an exciting fighter. And in this division, I think that does kind of carry some weight. It's not the most electrifying division out of all of them. Like, don't get me wrong, there's good fighters, but he kind of brings that heat. He brings fun fights. Just look at his resume thus far, and you can find your answer there. I like that fight. I liked it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I pretty much agree with everything you said about how you evaluate Dolidze at this point. The one thing that really surprised me about his performance, it felt like there was some parts early in that fight where his striking was actually hurting Marvin
Yeah,
Vettori,
I know.
which you look at the fight with Paulo Costa where Vettori didn't look, I mean, he just looked like a Terminator in there,
Yeah,
like Paulo landing bombs, and this is at a weight class that Vettori had not been cutting to. But
yeah.
Paulo came in super overweight for that fight, and like Vettori didn't seem phased by anything that Paulo threw at him, and it were hard
Mhm,
shots.
mhm.
So here, where there was a couple points where I was like, "Wait, he looks like he's a little hurt there." That shows that Dolidze he do packs a punch, man.
Yeah,
But I agree. I feel like he's kind of firmly established himself as like that borderline top 5 guy,
yeah, yeah.
and, I'm yet based off the performance, I'm yet to see anything above that.
Right,
And
right.
that's not a knock on him because it's very hard to be, a top 5
Yeah.
caliber fighter in any weight class. And obviously, if you're in that borderline top 5, you're not that far from a title
Mm-mm.
shot or a title fight. So in a way, I could see him rack off, if the right matchups come up, he could rack off a couple wins and get a shot. But 34 years old, more than likely, I feel like he's sort of hitting his ceiling now. And when you kind of look at, if I'm going to nitpick the performance here against Vettori, I felt like Dolidze got a little too predictable at points. I felt like
Kind of the
once
same thing.
it seemed like that overhand right is what he kept trying to land, and it worked early, but then it just the rest of the fight he was missing a lot on it.
Mhm,
I didn't see a whole lot of adapting as the fight went on to try to put himself in a better position to win. It felt like he had a game plan and he
mhm.
stuck to it completely. And that's fine and good. But I kind of like when fighters adapt on the fly and like when they see something's not working, they have the IQ, they have the wherewithal, the understanding of their current situation to try to adjust
Oh,
and
yeah.
get a win. I
It's next
prefer
level
that.
stuff.
So I think that holds him back a little bit just based off of what I saw there. But I thought it was a good fight. A lot of people were shitting on this fight. I don't really get it. I understand
Yeah.
Marvin Vettori is a fucking grinder, man, and he does what he needs to do to win. Isn't there to try to put on a show necessarily, but he's there to just fucking dig deep and get a win. And I thought he did that, but I thought it was for Marvin Vettori fights. I feel like it was more on the higher scale of that, like a little more exciting than what you might get from him usually.
Mhm. Yeah, he's been having a lot of those recently, it seems like, too.
Yeah. As far as anything else on the main card, I mean, Gunnar Nelson looked very good in his fight with Bryan Barberena. A lot of people were liking that submission prop. I got it at plus 120. I thought it was the easiest prop on the night, even though Bryan Barberena had only been submitted one time in his entire MMA career, and that was his last fight with RDA. But now it's been two, and it's been back-to-back fights. Gunnar got the armbar with 9 seconds left in the first round. Very impressive showing for him here. I just like to see Gunnar Nelson fight more.
Yeah, please. And I just want to say, I think I have a match for him because
Okay.
now he had a long layoff, right? He was out from September 2019 until March last year, then didn't fight again until obviously yesterday. It was almost 1 year to the day between his last two fights. So if he can be a bit more active, there's someone at welterweight who is extremely active and will fight anyone. And I think that is Neil Magny. I think that is an
Mm.
awesome matchup for both guys next. Neil to take a step back, Gunnar to get his chance to get back in to the top 15 because at one point he was there and fighting guys like Gilbert Burns, Leon Edwards, Ponzinibbio at Ponzinibbio's prime. So I think he's deserved it after these two wins, especially getting a sub over Bam Bam Barberena here. He's 34. He's always been kind of a name for that market. I like a matchup with him to get into the top 15 and one that's not severely like favored either way. I think the coin goes him and Neil Magny. I think it makes sense.
I like that matchup a lot. Let's not forget, Gunnar Nelson went to a split decision with Leon Edwards back in
Mm-hmm.
2019. So
Mm-hmm.
Gunnar Nelson's very good. A lot
Yes.
of people know. A lot of the newer fans might not remember, but
Ex-
we
yeah.
remember Dom.
Yes, we do.
So we'll move on to the prelims, and we can look at the prelims as a whole. Prelims, early
Yeah.
prelims. What was like if there was a big takeaway from this list of fights, what would your mind go to first?
The big takeaway. Ooh, I like the way you worded that. That's a tough question. I am going to go. Oh man. Let me
Yeah,
look here. Let me look. Let me look.
did I gave you a little razzle dazzle?
I'm still gonna go. I'm gonna go Mokaev here, just so we can have our discussion.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm interested. I held off on my thoughts off recording because I kind of wanted to hit you with them here.
Okay. I'm gonna have to like talk slowly here to
Well,
kind of really get my brain going.
let's start by saying that he
Yep.
did get the
Yep.
win over Jao Filho.
Mm-hmm.
Third round, 4 minutes 32 seconds left. So there was 28 seconds left in the fight.
Yep.
Now go ahead.
Okay. So Muhammad Mokaev is 22 years old. He's 4-0 now in the UFC, and he's ranked number 12 at flyweight. Okay, that's all. That's amazing, really. That whole sentence that I just said is pretty nuts.
Mhm.
And his skills are like really good, especially the grappling side of the coin. And on the feet, he just seems competent to be 22 with a grappling background. He's competent enough there. Obviously, there's room to be improved. At that age, he's got plenty of time to do that. My problem here, and it's weird because he's got literally in 4 fights has 3 submissions. But let's look away from the Cody Durden first round 58-second sub and the last 3: Charles Johnson, Malcolm Gordon, and then Filho from yesterday. When the fight's going on, I recognize that he is the better fighter, and I think he even knows that. And it's one thing, he's obviously confident in himself. But I feel like he kind of just coasts in a way. Like he just utilizes his grappling. He'll pressure you up against the fence. He'll get you down. If you get up, he'll take you back down. Rinse and repeat over and over and over. But then in these last 2, Gordon and Filho both presented danger and adversity to Mokaev. Gordon, I think, landed some good shots on the feet. Had him in a submission. Was it
Well, he had his back. I
Yeah,
know at
had his
one
back.
point.
That's what it was. And then Filho had him in a knee bar. His knee was bent behind his neck. He looked like The
Don't know
Exorcist. It
how he
was like
didn't tap.
yeah, it was disgusting. He was limping afterwards. I hope it's not a bad knee injury that he had to fight through there.
Yeah.
It looks bad. But it's like, okay, all of a sudden he'll face adversity and then it's like, oh, okay, let's get out of this. Let's flip a switch and then I'll finish you guys. Malcolm Gordon, he finished with 34 seconds left in the fight. And then yesterday, 28 seconds left.
That's funny.
So, like, I'm not trying to take away from how good he is, but I feel like he can make that, like, flip quicker. I feel like if he really, really wanted to, he could get these guys done quicker. Maybe not Charles Johnson. Charles proved to just be a lot better than I think people thought going in. Former LFA champion, if I'm not mistaken. So, credit there. But there's this other level that I want to see Mokaev take when he's in the cage. I don't like that it seems to me, and maybe I'm completely off. Maybe I am, and that's okay if I am. But it seems like he is okay with just doing the bare minimum to win. And then all of a sudden, if any danger presents itself, it's like, all right, let me just go ahead and finish you real quick in the 3rd round with a few seconds left. Am I wording myself okay? Am I coming off as confusing? And now I can just transition to what you're going to say, Noah.
I feel like you are nitpicking him a little too much. And I even admitted that I felt like I might be nitpicking him too much going into this fight. Because you kind of said, you pretty much said, like, if I remember right, going in, that you wanted to see him have that performance that was a bit, more comparable, I guess, to the Cody Durden
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah.
Would it sort of comparable to like what Ian Gary had just done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I would argue that that's what we got because that knee bar was essentially the equivalent of Ian Gary being dropped in his flawless performance outside of that. Like, I felt like Mokaev, what moment of that fight outside of the knee bar did Filho win?
None.
You know, and I get what you're saying. I feel like Filho I think Philo's a better fighter than you're giving him credit for here, because I
Probably.
think he's obviously a debutant, so we don't have a ton of knowledge about who he is and how good he really is. And considering his Contender Series fight was a comeback win,
Mm,
you know, that doesn't necessarily paint him as like a guy who, yes, maybe had earned a contract, but it might be a tough road for him to sustain
right.
that contract or
Right.
make that good on that contract. I get all of that. I was actually impressed by how Filho looked for the most part. I thought he was very defensively sound,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is why Mokaev struggled to even finish that fight
Mm-hmm.
earlier. So, like, you were kind of telling me, like, well, I don't understand how he's waiting till like there's 30 seconds left in the fight to finish it. Why doesn't he just finish it sooner? And I mean, Dom, I'm not gonna lie, it may just sound, and I know that's not exactly how you mean it when you say it, but it does sound like exactly the kind of thing that a casual would say. And I know you're not a casual, but like I can't think. I'm sure I've had times where I've been sitting with casuals watching a card, and they've been like, "Why is this guy just? Why don't he just knock him out, dude? Why don't he
Mm-hmm.
just submit him?"
Right.
Like, it's a little, obviously. I know that you know this. It's a little harder than to just do
Yeah.
it. And I think Filho being defensively sound, even in the grappling areas, he seemed to have better defense than maybe we thought going in. And like I said, a guy like Filho who is capable of having those kind of comeback wins when all hope seems lost later in the fight, that's a dangerous guy. And that's exactly what happened here. He didn't win virtually anything in that fight. But boy, as soon as he got that leg, he was holding on for dear life. And if Mokaev, I mean, God, maybe the splits he did before the fight, maybe that
Ugh.
prepared him for what was to come,
Yeah.
because I don't know how he didn't tap there. Obviously, if he had tapped, which it looked like he was going to, or his leg had snapped, which God
Ew.
forbid,
Oof.
we might be having a different conversation here. But since he didn't, he fights out of it and then is able to get the submission. Dominic, I'm more impressed by the toughness there.
Mm.
I mean, that's what my big takeaway was. Mokaev, I had been underwhelmed with against Malcolm Gordon and against Charles Johnson. And again, maybe I shouldn't be, because Charles Johnson seems to be pretty good. Malcolm Gordon doesn't seem to be all that good, but he does have a lot of UFC experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I admitted that I was a bit underwhelmed with his last two fights, considering I look at his talent as being so high. Here, he did face some like real adversity. Like, yeah, don't
Mm-hmm.
even, I know Malcolm Gordon had his back, but this was real adversity.
Yeah.
Adversity that almost any other person in the entire company would tap to and
Mm-hmm.
fight for another day. But he fought through it. And not only did he fight through it, Dom, he finished the fucking fight right after it with the
Yeah.
bum knee.
Yeah.
So I think that actually says quite a bit about this 22-year-old. And like, he's not just a talented fighter, but he's a guy that's got a lot of heart and has got a lot of durability. And hopefully, the injury that he sustained from that does
Yeah.
not keep him out for too long, does not hurt his career too much. If not, then I think that's only gonna this kind of those kind of moments, if it did not make like a very long-term injury, they'll only help him going forward,
Mm-hmm.
because just showed quite a lot of resolve there. So I was actually really impressed with the performance, because this is the kind of stuff that we kind of hope to see from some of these guys. We want to see
Mm.
them tested. We want to see them have to fight adversity, and this was a extreme version of that, but he did it.
Yeah, that's a huge question we always have with these young up and coming, even star potential guys is, can they face the adversity? When they do, can they, pull that shit out of the fire? Shout out to Leon Edwards' coach. And he's done it. Really, he's done it 2 times in a row, but especially in this one with a nasty, nasty knee bar. And I understand your like rebuttal on what you said, and it completely 100% makes sense. I think I am being probably unfair and a little bit nitpicky. I guess when I say that, like, oh, just do it sooner, because obviously it's easier said than done. And I don't mean it that way when I say that.
Well, you said,
I think it's that he
go
doesn't
ahead.
look to do it sooner. It's like he doesn't try to get them out of there sooner. And I feel like if he tried to get the back and pull that neck crank like he did in the third round, in the first or second round, he more than likely could do it. So maybe I should have said that earlier in the way I was wording it, but hopefully that at least makes a little more sense.
I will admit, after he gets out of the knee bar, it was really quick when he was able to
It's
get
like,
that
fuck you,
submission
dude.
on.
Here we go. Let's get you out. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Like he's like, "Oh, I thought we were just I thought we were just fighting to a decision. Now you tried to finish me. All right, fine."
Yeah, like
So
that. Like the way that he does that is impressive as shit. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong, but
no,
I'm
I
like,
get
dude,
it.
like,
It was really quick when he got out of that
yeah,
knee bar. What a sweat though for our buddy Jake Moore, who
dude. Yeah, the butt
had a
cheeks.
Mokaev by
Whew.
submission bet.
Yeah,
So what a moment for him, because boy, he has not had a great run with sports betting so far. His
yeah,
words, not mine.
yeah, yeah.
So nice to see one go well for him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, just hopefully Mokaev's not out too long. Like,
I
please
know, man.
don't let that injury really hold him back.
And to be that young, like,
I guess
you don't
that
want
is
that.
that somewhat that's like the
Like,
only thing that's maybe a positive from it is he
yeah,
is so young.
yeah,
So, like, if he needs over a year to recover from that,
yeah.
it's not like he's Roman Dolidze, who's 34, trying
Right,
to
right.
make a push right now. Like, he has time, I
Yeah,
guess.
for sure, for sure.
As far as the rest of the prelims, Jack Shore, who is your prelim headliner, making his debut at featherweight, did have to face more
Mm-hmm,
adversity than I
mm-hmm.
would have hoped for against Makwan Amirkhani, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, Dom. I'll say new weight class,
Yeah,
Amirkhani, tons of experience,
for
even
sure.
though he's on the downward, slide. And won the first round, Amirkhani did, but then round two, man, Jack Shore just looked like, I think that's when he settled in, got comfortable, and
Adjusting
Amirkhani,
to the
yeah,
way the fight's going.
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And Amirkhani looked overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
and kind of gassed, quite frankly, in that second round. And Jack Shore just ate him alive, got the finish 4 minutes 27 seconds in. So I thought it was I would grade Jack Shore's debut at featherweight as a solid, I would say B plus.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say B plus, B
I was gonna
minus
say
minimum.
B. I'll give him the plus because of the adjustments made
Mm-hmm.
on the fly, like you said, and I really like to see that. So,
Yeah,
gets to finish. He was a big favorite, so he sort of should have dropped that round. Kind of got controlled on the ground, so that drops him a little bit. But B plus, B plus, that range I think is where I'd put him.
what do you kind of even make of this move then? Apparently, he was drained the last three cuts at
Mm,
135, so he moves up. He looked pretty filled out. Nothing like, his physique
yeah,
wasn't anything crazy. He just looked more filled out, more energetic, I suppose. But like, he seems to fit. I mean, he wasn't a small bantamweight, so it's not like he's going to be undersized at 145. But what do you kind of make the potential you once viewed him at 135 compared to what you could potentially see from him at 145 now? What are you kind of thinking?
that's a good question, Dom. It's a very good question. So I'm fine with, I mean, the weight class move I'm fine with. Like I said, I tend to be more optimistic with going 10 pounds up versus 10
Right.
pounds down.
Yeah.
If it's true that he was really feeling that drained and he felt the need to move up, then, that's probably what he should do. I guess featherweight isn't as talent stacked as
Mm,
bantamweight. It's still very talented. So that's
yeah.
not even like, it's not like he's, at a very thin
Right.
division.
Right.
Um, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I mean, I still think he has a lot of potential,
Yeah. For
but it's
sure.
hard to say he has more potential at
Mm,
featherweight than bantamweight
yeah. Yeah.
because he was obviously a big bantamweight. So
Yeah.
that sort of some of those physical advantages were to his benefit there. That now he doesn't really have 10
Right.
pounds higher. But do I still think he could make a lot of noise and potentially even make a run toward top 5 and contendership status? Yes, I do. I do
Yeah.
still think that.
I agree.
It's
I
just,
agree.
The Ricky Simone loss has not hurt his stock at all, by
No,
the way, for
not at
me.
all, dude. Not at
I think
all.
if any, the only person that got affected by that fight was Ricky Simone, and that
And how
really
good he is.
sold him in my eyes. So,
Yeah.
um, he's, and in my opinion, he still is yet to have a performance where I'm like, oh, okay,
Right.
he's really not that good. Like,
Right.
I've yet to see
100%.
that.
Yep.
What about anything else, Dom, for you on these prelims? I mean, there
Uh,
was a lot of fights on here, but some of these fights were a little iffy. Take them or leave them.
yeah. I'll hit with two quick hitters because they were both
Okay.
first round finishes real quick. Ashmouz versus Sam Patterson. You want to talk about a size difference going into that?
Dude.
Sam Patterson is 6'3", like Jalen Turner at
Yeah,
155
unreal.
pounds.
I forget this
Yeah.
guy apparently was on the Contender
Yeah.
Series. Completely forget him because I feel like I would remember a lightweight that was
Ginormous, like,
this fucking huge. But
yeah,
yeah,
he was 6 inches taller than Yanal, but it didn't bother Yanal, man. He came in there, landed a nasty counter. I think it was a left hook, and
yeah.
put Patterson down. And then the ground and pound was just brutal. Sam Patterson, Noah said in our group chat, he was trying to wrestle Mark Goddard for 5 minutes
God,
afterward. I've not
yeah.
seen many last as long as that one did. So,
I felt
uh,
for him, man, because the camera just would not go off
I
of him, and I
know.
was like, "Come
Give
on,
the
man!"
guy
I
his
said, "They're
space.
showing this man trying to fight underhooks on Mark
Yeah.
Goddard for 5 fucking minutes. It was an
Yeah.
unreal amount of time that this
Yes.
camera just stayed on him."
Yeah.
And I'm like, this man just suffered a pretty traumatic brain injury. Maybe we should just cut to the winner, But God, I've never seen someone go that
No.
long of like being out of it, like in
Yeah.
terms of still trying to, because you see it sometimes when the guys will try to. Anderson Silva did it with Herb Dean when Chris Weidman
Yep.
knocked him out.
Yep.
Like you'll see
Oh,
these guys when they get knocked out, they start trying to
yeah.
continue going with the ref. But his man, that was the longest I've seen. I hope he's okay. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. 100%. So just shout out to Yanel. 7-0, 6 finishes from Israel. So,
Mhm.
another fighter from there. There's not too many in the UFC. Could be a fun fighter to watch. And Jake Hadley, man, back to back now. Really good performances. I think this is kind of what we were wanting to see
Mhm.
following that Contender Series debacle. I think it's safe to call that a debacle that he had. Plus, you add in that debut against Nascimento, as Noah said Friday. Nascimento, a big flyweight, very underrated, probably at 125 pounds, but still just a lackluster debut from Hadley. But now, back to back, submitted Carlos Candelario, knocked out Malcolm Gordon in a minute due to nasty liver shots. I mean, that was I like what I'm seeing now. 10-1. He's 26 years old
Mhm.
from England. He had the crowd on his side, obviously, there in the hometown. So I think, is it safe to say after these two performances, we can kind of at least get back on him a little bit? Like we could be on for something exciting at 125 pounds?
I'm gonna say yes because you worded it like that. You gave me a pretty safe
Yeah, I
question there.
pulled myself back a little.
So my only caveat is the broadcast was talking about Malcolm Gordon's problems with
Yeah.
making weight, and they were very much liver induced, I guess.
Hmm.
And they even said that he was pissing out parts of his liver. I didn't know that was
Oh,
possible.
yeah.
Is that actually possible? Was that just hyperbole, or were they being serious?
I
Because
hope it was hyperbole.
pissing out parts of your liver just sounds like maybe you shouldn't be fighting. So
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, he looked great. The full, even just the form on that punch to the
Yeah.
liver, like it just
Mm.
looked very strong, very powerful. He's like, it's been dropping on me partners in the gym, and
Yep.
stuff. So I like Hadley, I do, and I think he does have a little something like Dana White kind of talked about
Yeah.
from the Contender Series, and I just love seeing guys just in this flyweight division. I love seeing guys kind of make a name for themselves a little bit.
Hmm.
Build themselves just a bit. Jake Hadley's not necessarily, we're not talking about him being a star yet, but I do. When any of these guys that are from this area, when they go there, they feel like a star.
They do, man. Yeah.
So I think it's I think a lot of people, and yourself included, probably want to see Hadley fight Mokaev next. And the only thing
Knock on
that's
wood for
gonna
that knee.
stall that is Mokaev being out for an extended period. Um, I mean, Mokaev was calling out Brandon Royval before this fight. Don't you think
Yeah.
that Mokaev is still want that next big leap in the flyweight division?
I know, dude. Like, that's the thing. I'm such a hypocrite because on Friday, I'm like, why is he fighting a debutant? He's number 12. He should be fighting someone like number 10 or 11. I mean, shit.
That
And
debutant nearly
now,
beat him.
yeah, and now I'm calling for him to fight another unranked fighter in
Yeah.
Jake Hadley. But there's something about that storyline,
There's definitely
that
a
rivalry.
but I'm gonna say the same thing, Dom, that I said earlier about a different fight. But when you have a storyline like that, that's got
Yeah,
years of build and
yeah,
heat,
yeah.
and we see Jake Hadley showing a lot of potential now.
Mm-hmm.
Mokaev clearly has a lot of
Yep,
potential.
yep.
Should we wait till maybe
Oh,
these two guys are at the
yeah.
top of the division, which I do believe is very possible.
Uh-huh.
Mokaev especially, but Hadley back. I'm sort of coming back around to this idea that he could be a real
Mm-hmm.
player, and
Yep.
maybe then we run that.
All right. Since I went full bore with wanting to see Armand and Rafael at 155, I'll cool it. Give me a year or two.
I think
It
it
probably
makes
won't be
sense
much
to
longer
hold.
than that.
I think it makes sense to hold off for other reasons too.
Yeah.
Mostly because, well, Mohaev's knee,
We're of
obviously,
course.
but
Right.
obviously, I think it is time to give Mokaev like a top 10 fighter
Yeah, I
again.
would like to see it. Yeah.
So I think that's another reason for it to hold off and let Jake Hadley work his way into a ranking spot where it makes sense to have those two fight.
And we've talked about that. Like, isn't that such like that's the biggest problem at flyweight? We get a lot of it's good talent, man. It's like literally from top to bottom, probably the strongest it's been in a very, very long time, maybe ever. But when you get these new guys like Hadley and Mokaev, they can only fight so many people before they're in that top 15 and having to fight someone else with a number next to their name. But yeah, I mean, Mokaev has earned to fight someone in the rankings, even if it's just a spot ahead. And for Hadley, 2-0 or 2-1, I guess. I don't know what could come next for him. Probably not a ranked fighter. I mean, number 15 is Bruno Silva, and he just come off of a huge win, so he should fight
Yeah, what about
upwards.
Tyson Nam?
Yeah, he could fight Tyson Nam freshly out of the top 15.
Tyson Nam be a tough matchup for him too. A lot of length.
Yeah, has some
That's what
power in
he
his
struggled
hands.
with Nascimento's size. So
Yeah, I like. There we go. Hadley versus Nam. Mokaev, injury or not, let's give him someone ahead. Let's do that.
as far as the rest of the prelims, I will give a shout out to Lerone Murphy, Gabriel Santos. Just a great fight.
It was.
A lot of people thought Santos might have won, especially like if you look at when they show like the media scorecards, like I think only two had Lerone Murphy winning. But completely fair. But I thought it was such a close fight that I wasn't all that shocked to see Lerone Murphy get the win. And because of that, no, I'm not crying robbery here.
Yeah.
But both guys, I think, only look
Stock goes
good
up.
coming out. Only thing for Lerone Murphy, we need to see some more takedown
Activity.
defense.
Oh, sorry. Takedown defense.
And activity.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think that would help that issue.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It just
And
felt
dude,
like anytime Gabriel Santos shot, like
it was there.
Lerone was off balance and got
Yeah.
taken down pretty much with ease.
And like, what's it say to you? We've got an LFA champion, Gabriel Santos, undefeated. You debut against Lerone Murphy and have that close of a fight. I mean, that's good. 26 years old. Ceiling seems pretty high for him as well. I mean, this was a really, really good fight that I feel like a lot of people going in were leaning heavily to Lerone Murphy. I know he was only like, what was he, minus 170, minus 180 or something like that.
Yeah.
So like the odds wouldn't necessarily say that, but I saw a lot of fanfare for Lerone. So for Santos here, I feel like he was able to earn a lot of respect. A lot of people now know who he is, including us now even. So I really like this fight. I think it did a lot for both guys.
Completely agree with you there, Dominic. And with that, we will move on to the below average bet slip. I'm actually not sure how we did, Dominic. How did we do?
I believe it was like minus 0.95 total.
Yeah, Dominic, here's the thing. I forgot to mention, I did live bet Marvin Vettori, by the way, plus 300.
Can we just talk about that for a second, by the way? How did the odds balloon to plus 300 in that fight? There was not a moment in that fight where either person should have been plus 300. That's crazy.
Dominic, it flashed up on the screen during the broadcast. I think it was halfway through round 2, and it said Marvin Vettori plus 245. So I jump on there, and I'm like, okay, I'm putting this in. And then it ballooned all the way to plus 300 in the 10 seconds.
Crazy.
and like nothing had happened. There was like
No,
nothing of impact.
dude.
So I was like, dude, give me that all day. And then apparently I should have waited because Dolidze closed the fight at a minus 625.
That's crazy. I don't understand. Kudos to you. I'm so like that's big baller stuff there out of you to go find that line to notice the huge discrepancy. Like it's one thing to lie bet Alexa at plus 600. It's like, oh well, she's hanging in the
Yeah.
fight. Let's hammer it. But it was a clear in this fight where it was back and forth, tit for tat. No one should have been plus 300. You recognized the discrepancy, you capitalized on it, and you cashed. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the love there. I mean, it's live betting. I think is going to be something to.
I might have to start.
I think I'm going to have to really start because I'm 3-0. Alex Grasso plus 650, Marvin Vettori plus 300, and then Leon Edwards plus 135. Which Leon was bigger favorite going into that fight, so it's not like I got great value on that.
Right.
Like considering I thought he was up 2-0 in the fight and he was still looked at as an underdog. Maybe I was a little overconfident because a lot of people like you probably had it 1-1 at that point.
Yeah.
But all in all, it worked out. I definitely am going to be keeping my eye open moving forward on those live odds. I think there's a lot of good opportunities on there, and I want to start.
Well,
posting them.
let's make this public. This discussion here.
Yeah.
If they get placed, and we just tweet it out on our Twitter, live bet addition to the below average bet slip, it's got to count, right?
It's got to count. But unfortunately, because I did not post it before, it does
New
not
rule
count.
starting now. UFC San Antonio, watch out.
So because of that, I only ended up going about a quarter of a unit positive, which really was not very telling for my day as a whole. But
yeah,
it is what it is. The 2-unit money line parlay, Dom. That's my big takeaway. I didn't even mean to put 2 units on it.
Yeah.
And then when it came down to Fiziev, I started getting a little nervous. And then the fight happened, and I was like, yeah, that's probably not going to go our way. And it did not. And it is what it is. Like again, I didn't mean to put 2 units on it. I did. But I stuck with it. I could have, for the show purposes, done just 1 unit. I'm sure I've done that before where I've accidentally put more money than I wanted to. Or no, you know what I've accidentally done before? Meant to put a parlay together and accidentally placed the individual singles.
Separately.
And then, of course, the way DraftKings goes, you try to go in there and cash out, and you immediately can't cash out at the same amount you put in.
Yep, it's always less. Yeah.
So I've done that before and not counted them toward the show. But this was one where I was like, I might as well just put it. Unfortunately, I did two parlays yesterday between that one and then I had a one in March Madness. I had Duke and Missouri money line. Both of them lost.
Ooh, yeah.
So my 2-unit, once again, I tried to go back a little too dabbling with my unit sizes, and now I went right back into the hole. No longer tampering with the unit sizes. It ain't happening. Besides that, a couple women that I had a lot of hopes for disappointing me. Story of my life. No, I'm just kidding. Casey O'Neill money line. I said I thought I was disrespecting Jennifer Maia a little bit, and that kind of turned out to be true. She looked really good here.
She did look good. It was
probably her best. Actually, I'd say it's probably her best performance of her career.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe her win over, was it Joanne Wood? Her submission win over her that won the title fight.
Yep.
And then Juliana Miller was the one that was more concerning.
Yeah.
I think. Now, don't get me wrong. I can't even call her Macedo anymore. Hardy.
Yeah, they changed it fight week. Yeah,
looked really good.
She did. 3-year layoff, man.
Yeah, like she looked vastly improved.
Yeah.
But Juliana Miller, I will say she's still dangerous on her back, dangerous in her submission scrambles, and she was going for it, which I appreciate. Made the fight exciting enough. But her striking was looking a bit rough. And this was a girl who, despite her inexperience in The Ultimate Fighter, looked like such a veteran.
Yeah, really did.
So hopefully that's not telling for how that season of The Ultimate Fighter, that division, fares moving forward. But not a great sophomore showing for Juliana Miller.
Yeah, and it just hits a little worse when we both have the same play. So we have to, it's kind of
Yeah.
like a double whammy on it. But, you know, it is what it is. For me, I went 2-3. The total was minus 1.19 units. I mean, I can't really hold my hat on anything. Like the Marvin Vettori, Duncan Morales inside the distance parlay. Vettori wins. Duncan Morales, what was supposed to, many people thought was going to be a super exciting fight, was actually extremely dull outside of like one or two moments. So that was kind of a stinker there. And then Herbert Klein inside the distance. No, I had hope. I had hope that the 2.5 minute gap was going to hit. I really did. Even at like after the point deduction, I'm like, all right, well, Herbert's got to go. He's got to go and finish this fight. He ended up just kind of getting the decision there, or they went to a draw, obviously. But then Patterson Ashmouz inside the distance hit. But other than that, I mean, it's all right. We build. I'm having a couple rough weeks. Thankfully, Noah's at least going green to keep us
I
too
mean,
far
it's
in the red combined. But we want to have that big week again, right? We want to combine and have a good one. Maybe the Texas card next week will be in our favor.
it's just weird, Dom. Through 3 weeks on the back on the bet slip,
Yeah.
I've gone positive every week,
Yeah.
and that's not including my live bets, that don't count.
Yeah.
But yet, I think I'm total like I might be under 2 units positive personally through 3 weeks. Yeah, I've been positive every week. Like
Right.
it's like a little bit, but I still don't feel comfortable because
Yeah. Yeah.
like I feel like one bad week is going to wipe out a lot of this progress. So I definitely want to try to get better at my plays ahead of time. But it's weird though. Like the Herbert Klein over 2.5 was the bet I was least confident in, and that
But
ended
like
up being
overall though, it is a good read, especially the plus money it factored in, you know?
the plus money is what put it over the
Right.
edge. It ended up being my biggest hit on the
Yeah.
plays I had for the show. But I mean, I look at some of these and really I don't know what I would have went back. I mean, Juliana Miller, like I really thought that
The signs were there for
yeah,
that to hit.
Duncan Morales not start round 3. I mean, that seemed like a pretty safe one, but Duncan was not the same guy that he was
No,
on the
not
Contender
at all.
Series. He showed a much more grappling heavy style, a safer style. That was at minus 150. Casey O'Neill money line was the one I probably would have said was my lock. And
Mm.
obviously, that did not turn out to be the case. And then that 2 unit money line parlay, if I just put 1 unit on it, I'm over a unit positive. It's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess.
We live to fight another week.
Yeah. So let's move on to the final segment of the show. The only segment we would ever,
Mm.
ever end this show on.
Yeah.
A little segment we like to call closing statements. Point of the show where me and Dominic can talk about anything and everything, MMA related or not. And Dominic has got his thinking cap on. So I'm guessing he's going to want me to go first today for closing statements.
Yeah, please.
And that's a shame, Dom, because I have
Oh,
nothing for closing
damn
statements.
it. I was trying to, I need to get better. Well, at one point I felt like I was so good at these, and now I'm just, it's with age. I'm getting worse, I guess. I don't know. It was a long episode. Give us some slack on none today.
Yeah, no closing statements. We'll be better next time. We can't promise we'll be good, but we'll be better than the last time, as I said to the last girl I slept with. My name's Noah Baker. That's Dominic Slee. We are but just two of the below average Joes, and we'll see you guys on Friday.